How's it going, everyone? Are we okay? Love that. I'm trying to. I was going to be like, you know what? I'm going to try and knit through this video because I feel like I should, but I don't think I'm going to. But I'm going to show you what I'm working on. So I am working on. This is called. I want to say the Lunan t-shirt by the Creator, and this is the polo version. So it looks kind of like a bra at the moment, but I'm currently doing the neckline, and oh well, so you can see the kind of, yeah. Anyway, today we are going to start a deep dive into knitting history. We're gonna do it, and I'm not gonna do it all in one video because it's too much to cover, and I actually want to do it well. But I will condense it all into like a big video after I've done all the sections. But today we're going to start with ancient Egypt because I love Egypt. Egypt is my jam. I have always loved Egypt. I was that like really autistic person in like primary school that was obsessed with ancient Egypt. I had the book, you know which one I'm on about, if you know, you know. And I watched The Mummy and The Mummy Returns to death. That was like, that made me want to become an Egyptologist. So we're going to start with ancient Egypt. And obviously, the whole video is going to be about whether ancient Egyptians knitted or not. The answer might surprise you because it's one of them ones where we're going to be diving into weaving, we're going to be diving into textiles, we're going to be diving into everything to kind of answer the question whether the ancient Egyptians knitted or not. So yeah, let's go. It's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about ancient Egypt. We're going to be talking about the Mummy. We're going to be talking about Brendan Fraser is in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns and The Mummy 3, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. And the fact that they're making The Mummy 4 and Rachel Weisz is coming back. Oh, sorry. I love that film. That's like one of my film series. But we're not here to talk about The Mummy. We're here to talk about The Mummy Returns. No, we're not. We're here to talk about knitting. And my tablet's dead. This is a great start to the video, honestly. I feel like I could just leave all this in. So while my tablet is powering up, let's talk about The Mummy. Should we talk about The Mummy? I love that film so much. Like, it is... Oh, if you've never seen The Mummy from 1999, please go and watch it. Grab your knitting and just watch it. Just watch the whole series. It's like chef's kiss. It reminds me of, it's kind of like just the best like adventure film ever. It's got scares, it's got fit people in it, it's got treasure, it's got magic, it's got mummies. It's just like the perfect film. And oh my god, the intro of that film used to absolutely terrify me. Like the bit where Imhotep gets like mummified. He gets like bandaged up and then they throw scarab beetles on him. I actually thought that is how people got mummified. Like I did, like full on. I was like, no. And I was very disappointed to hear that the scarab beetles did not exist in that way. Anyway, thank you so much for all the love on my Myth and Legend video. It's been popping off. If you've not seen it, go and watch it. I think I did a pretty good job. Okay, so to begin with, did the ancient Egyptians knit? This question is kind of a complex question because there has been documented cases of knitting within ancient Egypt, but not till a lot later. So to start with, we're going to focus on what the ancient Egyptians actually used and what they kind of did, basically. So the ancient Egyptians were very advanced weavers. They basically wove everything, and they were like shit hot at it. Like they, honestly, they were sick, amazing at it. And they could literally produce a linen that was so, like such high quality that it was almost translucent. Like you could almost see through it. Gag. And some machines cannot produce linen that fine to this day. That's how good they were. They were like amazing. I swear the Egyptians were just like the tryhards of any ancient society. Like they just did everything amazing. Within ancient Egyptian society, they were very advanced weavers. and they didn't use cotton or wool. They did use wool, but not a lot, because they did think wool was impure. They wouldn't allow wool to be like put into tombs or any kind of burial ground because they thought it was impure. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's yeah. So they used something called flax, which is basically like a plant that grows in Egypt. It's like very long. It kind of looks like reeds, so it has like a bit of a flower on it, I think. But yeah, that was a kind of like their main source of making linen, and they were really good at producing it. They basically had a few methods to kind of turn the flax into yarn, I guess. And in processing the flax, it was very, very labor intensive, because they had to basically, they didn't cut the flax down, they pulled it out of the ground because they wanted it to be very long, basically. And then they had a few different stages of kind of manufacturing it. So firstly, they would kind of soak it in water. I think it had to be running water as well, but it wouldn't have been the Nile because I think creatures would have eaten it. So it had to be running water, because with the flax itself, there's like this green kind of material that surrounds the fibers. So they had to soak it into water basically to kind of break that stuff down. And this was called retting. When that process was done, they would kind of lay it out on the ground and let it dry in the heat. And then they would just smack the fuck out of it basically to start breaking down the fibers. And then they would use something like a comb to kind of actually get the fibers out, and then this is when they would kind of spin it. However, they didn't spin it in the traditional way where we think of spinning. They would use a method called splicing, where they would kind of rub the fibers onto a stone or a piece of metal, and this would kind of like heat the fibers up because they were covered in sort of like a wax coating, which made it all sticky. And then they would kind of join each piece individually together to eventually make this kind of long bit. Basically, they use something called a distaff, which they would kind of start to kind of put over. They would eventually turn it into something called roves, and some of these roves have been found in tombs, and I'll show you here. Boom. They do look brown, but apparently they used to be white, so just remember that. And they spun it in a few different ways. The main one they used was with a drop spindle. And if you've ever used a drop spindle before, you'll know that it has something called a whirl on it. The ancient Egyptians used their own kind of drop spindle that was a little bit different. And the reason for this is that they wanted it to spin faster. And I think with traditional whirls, they're kind of at the top. I may be wrong about this, but with the ancient Egyptians, they had the whirl at the bottom because they would kind of put it on the thigh, on the leg, and then just roll it with the, like this. And this would produce a faster spin, because with flax, they wanted it to have a very, 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 very tight twirl on it. And apparently with like ancient Greeks and most European spinning, like drop spindles, they only span at around 400 RPM. And the ancient Egyptians, their drop spindles span like over 2000 RPM. Like that's crazy. Like that's the amount of speed we're talking. And obviously once they had all of this yarn, they could start to weave. And the ancient Egyptians first started using horizontal weaves that were just basically staked in the ground, probably because due to the dry climate, they didn't have to worry about like bad weather or it raining or anything like that. So they could just literally drop it on the ground. There has been evidence of like vertical looms, but not until later on. And weavers were well respected in Egyptian society. Some great temples would have whole like weaving rooms where you'd have, you know, multiple people at the same time producing flax and then to make linen and then passing the linen on to the people to weave. So it was like a whole production, because obviously this is the only way they can make clothes. So if you're working in a great temple, there's so many people to clothe, so it has to be like a proper production. And they basically could produce linen so fine that some of the finest pieces had a stitch count of 500 stitches per square inch. And you can imagine how long that must have taken to weave. That is insane. And considering that it was almost translucent as well, like the actual finest pieces, like that is something that machines cannot produce to this day, apparently. It's like, oh, incredible. This leads me to kind of the next period of the evolution of kind of textiles within ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians were very experienced weavers, and you know, as the ancient Egyptian culture progressed, and there's so many different periods, which I'm not going to get into now because it's very complex. But you get to the period of the Silk Road, where ancient Egyptian society is starting to mix with a lot of other different cultures because of invasions, because of, you know, trade routes and things like that. And the Silk Road is kind of the start of where you start to find things like silk and cotton within ancient Egyptian textiles. And we can say at some point that, you know, the first cases of ancient Egyptian knitting has been dated to around 1000 to 1200 AD. That is when the first samples of knitted socks were found, and they were mostly in cotton. So, you know, who knows, like the opening of the Silk Road could have kind of had some sort of impact on that. So we're going to move on from weaving for the time being, and we are going to talk about nail binding. Yay! Some of the earliest kind of knitted socks were found within Egypt and were originally thought to be knitted, but it turns out they are actually a form of nail binding, which is, it looks very similar to knitting, but it's not. It looks more like, the process is more like sewing than it is to knitting. This is the sock that I'm talking about. Ding! It's very pretty and it looks incredible. It looks like knitting, but it's not knitting. So this quote says, the sock was probably constructed starting at the tip of the toes. This technique, called nail binding, is visually similar to knitting and can be mistaken for it, but it's actually a single needle technique more akin to sewing. Fine lengths of yarn are threaded through a small loop and then knotted in the process of completing a stitch and starting a new one. At the top of each toe, the stitches would have been worked with a long, broad needle to the round shape needed by pulling up a line of stitches tightly. So that's nail binding. So when did the actual knitted socks started to show up? This is kind of like an interesting tangent, but it's not. It kind of relates. So the first type of knitted socks that we found were found around 1000 to 1200 AD, and these were mostly knitted in cotton, and nail binding is thought to have faded out within ancient Egypt between that period as well. And it's also kind of the same period where Egypt was opening up to trade within the Silk Road. And if you don't know what the Silk Road is, it's basically a massive network of trade that connected multiple different societies together. So it connected China, Central Asia, the Middle East, the Mediterranean. So all of these were basically connected. And my whole thought process is like this kind of start of the Silk Road and Egypt getting silk and cotton and all this jazz may have been when they were kind of introduced to knitting, because the first actually knitted objects were found in the Middle East at around the same time, so 1000 to like 1200 AD. And the first actual knitted, like confirmed knitted objects within Egypt were found around 1000 to 1200 AD. And these were knitted in cotton from toe up. So still the toe up construction like Egypt, but these were actually knitted within the round, which is crazy to think. And there's even evidence to say that a lot of stuff was knitted flat as well. I'm going to put loads of images over this as well so you can see. And going back to weaving briefly as well, like the Egyptians still wove a lot, but this kind of, with the Silk Road opening up, this obviously introduced them to embroidery and God knows what, like so many different materials and dyes and things like that. So you saw like a big innovation within weaving as well. Next, I want to talk about the death and textiles. So obviously everyone knows that mummification was like a massive part of ancient Egyptian culture, and it was one of the things that got me into the mummy. Egypt, not the mummy, but anyway, the mummy got me into Egypt, so it connects. And I was fascinated by the whole process of mummification because I'm morbid as fuck. But the reason why I want to briefly talk about mummification is because mummification is one of the reasons why a lot of textiles were actually preserved. So they'd put things like shrouds, gift offerings, even the actual mummy itself would be shrouded in textiles and fabrics. And okay, I had to refilm the end of this video because my cat came in and just completely just disrupted me. So I thought I was just going to refilm the ending a bit. A very big expanse to, I can't with her, she's so funny. So within the ancient tombs, a range of different textiles have been found and amazingly preserved because of the dry climate in Egypt. Within the tomb, you have the mummy. The mummy is usually wrapped in linen, and we're talking like hundreds of feet of linen. And the linen itself would also sometimes be dyed, it would be painted, it would have lots of ornate designs on it because it all had spiritual meaning. Linen itself was seen as pure and was respected by the gods in some way. And then you also see later on, you have actual funeral shrouds that shrouded the body. These were often painted with portraits of the deceased. That's more of when we come into like the Roman period. Households of the deceased would often would often leave textiles within the tomb itself as gifts for the afterlife, for the deceased to actually use in the afterlife. So these were things like socks, sandals, different bits of dress, like very ornate designs. So fascinating, the fact that like even though they knew these would be sitting in a tomb for hundreds of thousands of years, they still spent the time and the energy to create them and make them as beautiful as possible. And we could even say that the act of mummification itself is like a craft. You know, the dedication of embalming the body and drying it out and making sure it's kind of well preserved, and that in itself is a craft. It's an act of love and a dedication, and so is all of these crafts. In conclusion, knitting has been around in Egypt. It was there. It just wasn't there until a lot later on. And even then, I don't think it was as big of a thing as weaving was, because I think weaving was their thing. They were amazing at it. There's not been a lot, I don't think there's been a lot of fully knitted garments from Egypt. Like I couldn't necessarily see like a full jumper or like, you know, all of that stuff was weaved. So yeah, but anyway, it's really interesting to see where like it's come from and their journey with weaving and how they eventually did get to knitting. But yeah, if you do want to see more of these kind of historic videos of knitting and fiber arts, I will gladly do it. It depends how this video does. I'm not like the greatest, I'm not a historian, so I just do my research on how I think it'll narratively fit within this video. Like I don't want to go too deep within the history and not cover enough of the fiber art side of it. So I'm trying to like balance a fine line. It's very difficult. Like this video was hard to do because there were so many different things that I wanted to cover, but I didn't want to go into too much detail, and then everyone's like, this isn't about knitting. So I tried to keep it, you know. But yeah, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much, because this one was really difficult. And leave a yarn ball, say yarn ball in the comments so I know you made it to the end, and I'll be like, I will hopefully be trying to do Greece next. If this video does well, it depends. If it flops, then I might just be like, fuck, I'm gonna have to rethink my life. But anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you have a nice evening or day. Oh, also, if you want to follow me on my social media, all the links are below. You can also buy me a coffee if you're feeling nice, because this is my life. And also subscribe. That would be great. Bye.